More on the Newark, New Jersey story now. Seldom, if ever, have so many public officials in one state and one city been in such trouble with the law. Here is a report on New Jersey and Newark from ABC's Gregory Jackson.
This is the county courthouse in Newark, New Jersey, and if not actually the place, at least a symbol for the place where rich mobsters have arranged for friendly relations with judges and politicians. With a sudden rush of indictments this week, there can be little doubt about the existence of syndicate crime in the state. The question is, why New Jersey? We put it to Ralph Salerno, former New York City detective, whose major job over 20 years was to keep track of the mafia in the East.
New Jersey has had organized crime reach a new peak of success because they provided basically a favorable atmosphere to operate there. They allowed a penetration and a corruption of the local levels of government because the political situation in Jersey is such that the real power is given over to the county level. They're operated almost as individual duchies. So something that can affect the state as a whole is actually being achieved down on the county level.
Jersey in general, and Newark in particular, did not become a cradle of corruption overnight. It's an old city, once a slave state, and they voted against Lincoln here in 1860. But industry flourished and the immigrants came. Last were the Italians and the blacks and the Puerto Ricans. Today, Newark is the most commuted to city in the country. Even the reputed mafia leaders don't live here. This is the home of one of the men indicted today, Anthony, also known as Tony Boy Boyardo. Police have been unable to locate him. For those who remain, the property taxes are staggering. The schools in the city's core have been described as deplorable, and city services have declined. And it was this decay of the city, coupled with charges of police brutality and corruption, that led to the Newark riots 2 years ago. A commission investigating the riots said later that a pervasive sense of corruption existed throughout Newark. The Newark police director, Dominic Spina, was indicted for failure to enforce the gambling laws, but he was acquitted when it couldn't be proved his laxity had criminal intent. Before his arrest and indictment today, Mayor Hugh Addonizio had taken the Fifth Amendment rather than answer questions for a grand jury, although he did admit knowing a reputed Newark mafia leader.
Tonight, I think that they're going to keep...
But those are the big people, and corruption most often crushes the little people, teenagers who drift into drugs, for example. And recently we talked to some rehabilitated drug addicts in Newark and asked them what it was like on the streets.
I know one personal experience that I got drugs off a policeman. He used to buzz junkies and just have the drugs for himself when he wanted to abuse the girl drug addicts. And he'd have this like to bribe them with the drugs.
He'd give you drugs in turn for your favors?
Yes.
And this man, he said to me, he said, well, I can get you out of it for a sum of money like $75. And I couldn't get the money. I could only get $55 of the money. I gave him the $55, figuring, well, I owe him 20. But I never paid him the other 20, and everything was squashed from there.
And you personally gave the councilman $55 as a bribe to take care of 2 tickets?
Personally, myself, handed it to him.
It's the quarters from the lottery rackets, the $5 heroin bags, and the petty payoffs that pour into the mob's treasury. ABC's Bill Lawrence talked about that with New Jersey Governor-elect William Cahill.
Would you have any idea, if you ever estimated yourself, how much organized crime might be taking out of New Jersey?
Well, the estimates, of course, are pure estimates, but it runs into the millions of dollars, unquestionably. Hey, honestly, Bill, that we're going to make a sincere effort, and it's going to receive priority attention. And while we may not eliminate it, in my judgment, we're going to reduce it. And we are going to get the word out to everybody that New Jersey is not going to be a very safe place for criminals of any kind.
For New Jersey, then, perhaps some light at the end of the tunnel and some lessons. Most of the state's big mobsters didn't come here until the 1940s, when too much heat was put on them in New York City. The mafia can only operate when it can buy its way in, and when that changes, the mob moves on. And perhaps there's the question for the citizens of this country at the moment. Where do they go next? This is Gregory Jackson, ABC News in Newark, New Jersey.
I'll be back with more news in a moment.
3 federal grand juries are looking into crime and alleged links between the mafia and government officials in New Jersey. Much of their interest centers on Newark. But on the surface, there was no concern at Newark City Hall today, as Robert Shackney reports.
Officially, it was said to be a day of business as usual for the mayor of Newark, Hugh Addonizio. The mayor allowed himself to be photographed at his desk. He was, in his words, just continuing to run an efficient and effective government. Although the mayor, along with 14 others, is under federal indictment for extortion and tax evasion, there is, according to the state attorney general, no legal way he can be removed from office pending trial except by recall petition. But there were calls for his ouster, along with the other public officials indicted with him. Charles Hall of the Chamber of Commerce explains why.
Well, we think that during this period of time there'll be a lot of suspicion, there'll be a lot of concern by the people on the street, there'll be some loss of faith of the process of government, which in a democracy is vital. We think it could also affect our federal relationships in terms of the funding that's necessary by the federal government to keep our city rolling, and that the efficient process of local government will not take place during this period.
I haven't done anything wrong. It's true I'm under indictment, but I think that I should at least have my day in court. We expect to have that.
Do you think you will get that day in court? Do you think there might be anything that might hurt your case?
No, I believe that certainly every man is entitled to a fair trial, and I think that we will very well have our day in court.
Well, Mr. Mayor, some people have called for your resignation. What do you say to that? You're stepping down.
Well, look, now, you fellas know that I've always tried to be cooperative with the press. I think it's recognized that I can't say too much at this time, but as I indicated to you, we're trying to run this city as efficiently and as effectively as possible. We will continue to do that.
Well, Mr. Mayor, do you intend to stand for re-election?
Will business be as usual today?
The mayor and his co-defendants are to be arraigned tomorrow, a day in court. There will, in fact, be many days in court, so many and so many trials, that the U.S. Attorney has asked for 2 additional federal judges in New Jersey to help out. Robert Shackney, CBS News, Newark.
But in 3 ways, this campaign was different from others. 1, both men are Democrats. 2, the mayor, along with 7 others, is on trial, charged with forcing kickbacks on city contracts. Each night, the mayor said,
"And I am innocent of those charges, and I will be vindicated in the courts of this land."
The trial, still going on, cost him some votes, but the way the government rushed the case to court during the campaign won him some sympathy. However, the trial was not crucial in the campaign, and that's because of the 3rd significant fact, namely, that Newark is a city in transition. In all cities of transition, race takes on overriding importance. Everything is more so in Newark, for the scars of the 1967 riot are still raw, and racial tension still explosive. Both blacks and whites walk in fear. Despite both candidates' denials, race was unquestionably the crux of the campaign. On the Addonizio side, the appeal to the white vote was largely through fear.
But my opponent is the product of a black convention that excluded white people.
For a while, Addonizio supporters gave out hate literature, and the mayor himself made the militant black playwright Leroy Jones his target, claiming Gibson was Jones' puppet.
Addonizio is using me as a black herring to try to hide the fact that the federal government has indicted him for extortion.
When the mayor stopped, others kept on.
Leroy Jones, who, in my opinion, is a communist, who has gone to Cuba, who has advocated that he's for the Black Panthers, and he said in the Elizabeth Journal, quote, "Slit Whitey's throat, rape his daughters, burn his house, and rob him."
These people are trying to stir you up, create a situation, get somebody killed, so they can run in and control our situation, put up barricades, and say, we keeping the peace.
The major Gibson strategy is the appeal to black pride, to get blacks to vote black because they are black. And to that end, a whole battery of top VIP black celebrities were imported.
People, don't you understand? That boy's gonna need a helping hand. He'll grow up to be an angry young man someday.
Each candidate views the future dimly if his opponent wins.
Well, I think that we'd have to be concerned because of the people that he's identified himself with. Unfortunately, I think that he has extremist elements with him. I think he makes allowances for them instead of repudiating them. I don't think that this would be good for the city of Newark.
I have some serious question about whether or not Newark can survive too much longer as a viable municipal entity with Addonizio as mayor.
Why?
Well, I think that if you look at the last 8 years of decline in the city of Newark, there's a serious question as to how far a city can decline before it ends.
The tragedy is that this campaign has heated up existing racial antagonisms, and whoever wins will suffer from it. Aline Saarinen, NBC News, Newark.
Addonizio was forced to campaign in the evening hours. In the daytime, he is standing trial in a federal courtroom, charged with conspiracy and extortion. He was back at the courthouse today, where he was asked about the bruising campaign.
Well, I think unfortunately this campaign has certainly polarized the community to some extent, further than I had hoped would happen, and I want to do everything I can to try to bring this community together again. We're making overtures now to the new mayor-elect to see if he will not meet with me and release some kind of statement or make some effort toward bringing the community together.
The mayor-elect, who takes office July 1st, held a news conference today, a call for reconciliation, which was the theme of his campaign.
And I want to call on the energies of all the people of Newark, and I want to stress that all the people of Newark, those who supported me in the campaign and those who didn't, because we must all work together in improving the quality of life in the city of Newark. Building and rebuilding is what we're talking about. Growing, that is the city growing, is what we're talking about. There will be no place for fears, or old animosities in our new city.
But for now, at least, Newark is an old city. It did not grow old gracefully. It will not improve easily. Burdened by decay, a severe housing shortage, inadequate and insufficient classroom space, one of the highest infant mortality rates in the nation, a high crime rate, a disappearing middle class. Gibson received an estimated 96% of the black vote, 15% of the white vote. Enough for victory, but not enough to change Newark's image as a polarized city yet to recover from the deadly and divisive riot of 1967. For Kenneth Gibson, a difficult job ahead. Morton Dean, CBS News, Newark, New Jersey.
A federal jury last night convicted former Mayor Hugh Addonizio of Newark of extortion and conspiracy. Addonizio and 4 co-defendants were found guilty of all 64 counts in the indictment. On each count, they could be sentenced to 20 years in jail and could be fined $10,000.